For centuries, men have pondered the mysteries of their world and the heavens above. Often their questions have been quite limited.
Why does rain fall?
And the answers have been equally specific.
Because heat from the sun turns water to vapor, which rises, cools, and returns to earth as rain.
Often the questions have been more far-reaching.
What is the smallest particle of matter?
And the answers have had almost unending implications.
The atom is the tiniest known unit of matter.
At times, the mere struggle to survive has left man with energy to do little more than accept the workings of nature. But at other times, man has had enough leisure to pursue a desire to know. Sometimes the resulting discoveries have revolutionized man's thinking about himself, his world, and the universe, and have had consequences far into the future.
Challenger Deep. Imagine taking a journey to the deepest point on Earth. It would be exciting for sure, but undeniably terrifying at the same time. The Challenger Deep is the deepest known point of the seabed of Earth. This extreme abyss lies at the southern end of the Mariana Trench in the western Pacific Ocean. James Cameron didn't just stick to directing blockbusters. He's a deep sea enthusiast as well. In 2012, he climbed into a specially designed submersible called the Deep Sea Challenger and descended about 36,000 feet, reaching the Challenger Deep, which is deeper than Mount Everest is tall. There's a handful of others who've dared to explore this mysterious abyss. Victor Vescovo, a Texan adventurer and businessman, went deeper in 2019. His submersible, the Limiting Factor, touched the ocean floor at a whopping 36,070 feet, breaking records. So right, it's deep, but what's down there? All sorts of weird and wonderful creatures, and some of them have never been seen anywhere else on Earth. Deep sea divers have also discovered microorganisms that thrive in the extreme conditions of the deep where sunlight can't penetrate. They survive in total darkness and under intense pressure. Organisms like this are pretty cool to discover too, because it makes us really question what the true limits of life are and the potential for extraterrestrial life in the universe that may thrive in environments we never thought living matter could. Number 9, humanoid creatures. So the year is 1982, and Russian military divers are conducting routine training exercises in the deep, dark waters of Lake Baikal, the world's deepest freshwater lake. These divers reported encountering something they couldn't wrap their heads around: humanoid creatures. Survivors stated the beings were about 9 feet tall, with humanoid features and silvery scales or suits covering their bodies. Some even say they had large, unblinking eyes that emitted an eerie glow. Now, the official stance is predictably hush hush. The Soviet government supposedly classified any information related to this incident, which of course just turned cryptid and UFO enthusiast cranks even more. What makes a possible extraterrestrial or mythical creature sighting more plausible than a government cover-up? And at number 8, we have a story posted to Reddit by user Digestive's Rule. This was in response to a thread asking divers what the creepiest thing they'd experienced while diving was. Digestive's Rule wrote, "I'm a commercial diver and was once on a job cleaning a portable water reservoir. I'd been in other reservoirs before, but this one was by far the biggest, at 40 by 80 meters. To get in, you had to open a hatch in the ground. The whole reservoir was underground, and climb down a ladder. The hatch was in a corner, so when you were in the far corner of the reservoir, it was completely pitch black, and you just had to hope your light didn't go out. I was about halfway through a 3-hour dive when the batteries in my torch started going flat. I watched the beam get narrower and dimmer until it cut out completely. It's not a huge problem if you lose light, as you can just follow your umbilical back to the hatch. Just as I started walking back, some obnoxiously loud banging started somewhere in the reservoir. I was the only diver in there, so it both confused and scared the out of me. Needless to say, I ran back to the hatch as fast as I could. I ended up getting my torch changed out and doing another hour in the water, but I didn't hear the noise again. I still have no idea what it was, but the combination of my torch going out and loud banging coming from somewhere gave me a hell of a fright. Now let us turn our attention to the elusive giant squid. So for the longest time, these colossal creatures were thought of in the same way the Loch Ness Monster is, simply rumored to exist, but rarely seen and often dismissed as seafaring folklore. The big breakthrough in the giant squid saga came in 2004, when researchers and a Japanese film crew managed to capture the first images of a living giant squid in its natural habitat. I cannot imagine the excitement. They basically stumbled on a real-life sea monster. The series of images were a game changer, proving that these creatures weren't just the stuff of sailors' tall tales. Then in 2012, another significant moment occurred when scientists managed to capture giant squid footage for the first time in its natural habitat. This time, submersibles were used to spot the creature. So what makes giant squids so fascinating, other than how elusive they are? Well, they're colossal. Some individuals can reach lengths of up to 43 feet with eyes the size of basketballs. Speaking of giant stuff, let's talk a bit about giant isopods. The giant isopod is a crustacean that inhabits the Mariana Trench and other deep sea environments. They kind of look like an oversized pill bug. These things can reach lengths of over 16 inches. Thank God these things were designated for deep sea environments. I've always thought potato bugs are actually kind of cute, but they would not be cute if they were 16 inches long. Don't have the time for that kind of thing scuttling around my apartment. Giant isopods are scavengers feeding on the remains of dead animals that sink to the trench floor. Their slow metabolism allows them to survive on limited food resources in the deep sea environment. Next up on the list, we have underwater pyramids in Cuba. There is a lot of controversy surrounding the so-called underwater pyramids off the coast of Cuba. Discovered by oceanographer Pauline Zalitsky and her husband Paul Weinswig in 2000, these structures lie at a depth of around 2,000 feet. So when images of this underwater site were first released, people looked at them and were like, that looks like some kind of underwater pyramid or something. Are these structures that maybe are part of some ancient lost civilization? The mysterious alignment of the structures has also led some to propose extraterrestrial involvement. The idea that maybe these pyramids could be part of an ancient alien civilization's underwater base. Just like with many cases of this kind, some also claim that governments and mainstream archaeologists are suppressing information about the site to maintain the status quo. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have, of course, these skeptics. They basically just said these are natural formations, and what folks are seeing is just a case of pareidolia. While many remain skeptical about the existence of an advanced ancient civilization beneath the waves, looking at these images, you really can't deny how uncanny some of these formations look. And number 4, we have Bimini Road. Bimini Road, discovered off the coast of North Bimini Island in the Bahamas in 1968, has again a lot of controversy surrounding it. It consists of a series of rectangular limestone blocks arranged in a linear pattern, looking almost like a road. The discovery was first made by pilots flying over the area, and then underwater expeditions confirmed the existence of the submerged structure. Now, according to mainstream scientists, Bimini Road consists of beach rock, a result of sand and shell fragments cementing over time. So many of them believe it isn't man-made, but there are more interesting theories. Some propose an Atlantis connection, that maybe the structure is a remnant of the mythical lost city. There's just too many straight lines and right angles in the formation for it to be some natural occurrence. And there are theories not linked with Atlantis, the possibility of some other advanced prehistoric civilization predating the known cultures. And because the internet exists and there are people with all kinds of crazy ideas all over the globe, there are even more outlandish theories about this formation, some claiming technological anomalies associated with the stones, like unusual magnetic fields and unexplained energy readings. Alright, back to some mysterious creature stuff though. The yellow belly sea monster. On September 11th of 1876, Captain John K. Webster and James Anderson aboard the Nestor saw something they'd truly never forget. It was an unidentified sea creature while off the coast of Malaysia. They described the thing as about 60 to 100 feet in length. It looked a bit like a large tadpole with a flat necklace head. It didn't seem to have any fins or flippers either, and its yellow skin had a prominent black stripe running along its spine. About 9 years later, on October 4th of 1885, a similar creature was observed in South Africa. Witnesses reported a 90-foot creature with yellow skin, black stripes, but this creature had fins on either side. In 1965, Bernard Heuvelmans, a Belgian-French scientist, explorer, researcher, also often referred to as the father of cryptozoology, looked at these two sightings and then categorized the creature as the yellow belly. He believed it could be an unknown shark species or possibly an amphibian, creating a classification for tadpole-like sea monsters on a bigger scale. Of course, the most famous yellow belly sighting, though, occurred on December 12th of 1964 near Hook Island, Queensland. Robert Lasarick and his family, along with a friend, spotted an 80-foot creature in the shallow water. At first they thought it was dead because of a visible wound, but it opened its mouth and began swimming towards their boat. The creature had smooth, dark skin with brown stripes, no visible fins or teeth, and slit-shaped pupils. Then the family just got out of there. At number 2, we have the underwater Stonehenge. Off the shores of Lake Michigan lies an intriguing underwater discovery known as the underwater Stonehenge. Researchers came across the site while using sonar technology to explore the lake's floor. The underwater formation features a cluster of stones arranged in a circular or horseshoe-type pattern, looking a lot like the renowned Stonehenge in England. In terms of the mainstream scientific world, experts propose that the stones may be natural geological formations. That always seems to be their go-to. People will be like, ah, look at this, and then they're like, it's natural, it's natural. While others think that this site might hold evidence of an ancient civilization predating recorded history. The stones seem to be placed in this very precise alignment, and of course, Atlantis always comes into the conversation. Finally though, we have another story posted to Reddit. This one by user Tamu. Actually, we have 2 short stories here. They go as follows. This isn't my story, but my dad's. So when he was in grad school, he did some field studies classes, some of which involved diving in Monterey Bay. One day he was diving, counting something off the Santa Cruz Pier, and he finds a shopping cart with bricks and cinder blocks and a chain attached to the handle. He naturally followed the chain and found a bare foot wrapped in the chain. He assumes something probably ate the rest of the body, and apparently his friends had seen similar things too. Also not mine, but my dad's friend. He says he was on a shelf counting mussels when he felt something tap his tank. He looked around, didn't see anything. He figured it was a seal, because they like to play. When he was nudged again, he saw it was a great white. He says he thought to himself, if it gets me, I can't outswim it. Now, I don't know if he was actually that chill. I sure wouldn't be, but that's how he tells it. So that second story really gets me. Like, the foot is super creepy, but turning around to see a great white right next to you, and you're in its habitat, and you just have that acceptance of like, there's nothing I can do in this situation. That is fear on like a true primal level. Yeah, spooky. I got a new Bigfoot video for you guys. This video was posted to TikTok by the Kentucky Bigfoot Research Organization with the description reading, alleged trail camera footage has emerged of what appears to be a giant black Bigfoot throwing trees and destroying a potential crime scene where it is said human remains were located. So this is a pretty clear video. The creature is obscured by trees, but we do get a nice long look at it. And just like the description says, whatever this thing is, it's picking up big logs and hurling them around like they're nothing. Take a look. Yeah, that ain't no bear. The way it like picks it up and just like slams it down like that. If I saw some hairy thing slamming a log down in the middle of the woods, I would be booking it right out of there. There are a few things that make this video convincing. For one, the clear strength the thing seems to exhibit. One commenter wrote, "I had a tree business before, so I know the weight of logs, and that would take extraordinary strength to do that." I also like that this footage was supposedly taken with a trail camera. If this had been taken by some hiker in the woods, I'd be wondering why they stuck around to film when it's pretty obvious you'd be running for your life. Anyway, what do you all think of this one? Hoax? Genuine? Let me know down in the comments.
Next up, we have the shocking discovery of Cole Brings Plenty, an actor best known for his role on Into the Wild Frontier, as well as his work on 1923 and The Tall Tales of Jim Bridger. Plenty was last seen on March 30th of this year, driving his white Ford Explorer out of Lawrence, Kansas. He was reported missing the following day. After receiving a call about an empty vehicle matching the description of Plenty's, police canvassed the woods nearby where it had been left. And on April 5th of this year, 2024, Cole Brings Plenty was found dead. While the cause of death has yet to be shared with the public, police insist that they will continue to investigate the passing and provide more information as time goes on.
Aliens in Brazil. So this is a bit of a weird story. Just back in January, hikers in Brazil captured some strange figures looming over them at the top of a hill. Figures who they believed to be of extraterrestrial origin. And I will say, whatever these things are, they don't look human. I mean, not quite. There's something just kind of off about them. The footage was captured on an island about 285 miles down the coast from Sao Paulo. In the video, we see a beautiful hillside, but perched on top are two tall humanoid figures silhouetted against the sky. And considering how far away they are, they look to be pretty tall. The people who posted the video said they were about 10 feet tall. Now on top of that, their bodies just look weird. They're very slender, and zooming in on one of these things here, yeah, just take a look at how long that arm is. I mean, sure, the image is blurry. Maybe it's just kind of distorted, or maybe, you know, Slender Man was on vacation in Brazil. It does have a bit of a Slender Man kind of look to it. Now, if you're wondering, oh, maybe these were just like, you know, scarecrow type things at the top of the hill, you do actually see them move a little bit in the footage, and they don't move naturally either. I don't know, could totally be a hoax, could also be genuine. Let us know your thoughts in the comments.
Next up, we have another body found in the woods, this time just off of Richmond International Raceway, a car racing track located in Henrico County in the state of Virginia. Around 4 p.m. on April 25th, a man visiting the track went to use the washroom when he noticed a strong smell. When he followed it, he discovered the body of an unknown man or woman that, according to reports, was not skeletal but had likely been in the woods for an extended period of time before being discovered. Of course, seeing as this is incredibly recent, there is not much information on the case, other than it seems as though the body was left there intentionally. Police have yet to release the cause of death or any other identifying information on the deceased, probably because they don't know. They did state that they are sifting through missing persons reports in an effort to identify who the victim might be.
Next up, we have a jogger who captured a pretty creepy image and didn't even know about it until later. A runner named Kay Borleys was on an endurance run with the Hawaiian ultra running team during a particularly harsh stretch of the loop full of tree roots and water crossings. She ended up injuring her foot and had to pull out of the race. Her pacer, Cassie, had been capturing images the entire time though, so she had some photos to show her friends and family. As she scrolled through the images, something caught her eye though, something that sent a shiver down her spine. It looked like a ghoulish figure had been peering out at her from the brush. Take a look. Kay posted her story along with the images to Reddit, and they were blowing up recently. And it makes sense, because that is a pretty creepy image. It looks like a zombie is walking through the woods there. Both Cassie and Kay didn't remember seeing anyone else on that part of the trail, saying tourists weren't out that early. We didn't see anyone for hours while running together, so we were, and still are, positive there was no one there.
Next up, we have yet another body discovered in the woods near Vietnam Veterans Memorial Bridge in Lewiston in Maine. On Friday afternoon, on the 3rd of May of this year, a body was found inside a tent in the wooded area beneath the bridge. Authorities were called and police arrived at the scene shortly after, around 4:30. Of course, as is with everything on the list, this is incredibly recent. I mean, you did click on a video about disturbing things found in 2024, just 5 months into 2024. So there's not much information. What has been released to the public though is that the body was removed from the area and brought to a medical examiner. The person's identity as well as the cause of death remains unknown.
One of the creepiest things about the woods to me are all the noises. Through the dense vegetation and the sheer size of some forests, you never really know what could be lurking out there. So when you hear something like this, yeah, it makes you pretty uneasy. That sounded like the werewolf howl from An American Werewolf in London. If you've seen the movie, you know the one. Not what I want to hear while trekking alone through the forest. The video was taken in a forest somewhere in eastern Canada a few months back. Now, it being the Canadian wilderness, there are tons of things that could have made a sound like that. Doesn't make it sound any less frightening though. It could be a moose call. But have you ever seen a moose up close? They're gigantic. And there's also the possibility that it is a Sasquatch call. Can't write that off either.
Next up, believe it or not, is not a dead body, just an incredibly creepy abandoned home filled with creepy and decrepit knickknacks. Earlier this year, 2 Canadian urban explorers stumbled upon an abandoned home while exploring in Ontario. As the explorers entered the home, they were greeted by a doll sitting on the staircase, and many other vintage dolls and toys were scattered around the house, some in okay condition for an abandoned house, that is, and some not really. Many stuffed animals had been ripped to shreds and strewn across the floor, making for a pretty eerie sight. As the explorers made their way through the home, they were greeted in each and every room by another pair of lifeless, unblinking doll eyes. One of the explorers even said that it was the strangest abandoned house they had ever seen, and that it was also super creepy. If you have a fear of dolls, I wouldn't suggest seeking this place out because I don't know, you might pee your pants.
This next story comes to us from Reddit. It was posted about 6 months back from a now deleted user. I hope they're okay. It goes as follows. Hey everyone, I need to get this off my chest. Something weird happened to me yesterday and I can't shake the feeling that I was being followed. So I decided to take a hike in the ravine near my house. It's usually pretty quiet, but yesterday things felt off right from the start. About halfway into my hike, I started hearing twigs snapping behind me. At first I thought it was just an animal, maybe a raccoon, but when I turned around, there was nothing there. I shrugged it off and kept walking, but I kind of felt like I was being watched. Then I started to hear footsteps. Not the rustling of leaves or the scurrying of small animals, but distinct footsteps like someone was walking right behind me. I stopped. I looked around, but again, nobody there. At this point, I started to feel really uneasy. I picked up my pace, hoping to shake off whatever was following me, but the footsteps kept getting closer. I could almost feel someone breathing down my neck. I broke into a sprint. I didn't stop until I burst out of the ravine and back onto the street. When I finally caught my breath, I glanced back at the trees, half expecting to see someone standing right there, but there was nothing. I don't know what to make of it. Maybe it was just my imagination playing tricks on me, but I can't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in there.
And finally, we have the discovery of a 22-million-year-old forest located in the Panama Canal. And while this discovery is not spooky scary, like unknown beings and unsolved deaths, it's scary in the sense that it reminds us that we really know nothing about the planet that we live on. Earlier this year, scientists discovered a 22-million-year-old forest that had previously disappeared after a volcanic eruption. They discovered remnants of the forest on Barrow, Colorado Island after noticing fossilized trees on the island that they believe were likely all buried and fossilized by volcanic lava flow in the same massive event. The fossilized trees represent a species of mangrove previously unknown, and it is believed that they can grow to be upward of 131 feet tall, which is wild considering modern-day mangroves generally grow to be only about 20. Starting off our list today with the Frankenstein bog mummies. In 2002, a team of archaeologists discovered two bodies in Scotland, belonging to two people who had died 3,000 years ago before being thrown into a bog where they were preserved and mummified and then buried 300 to 600 years later. One was the body of a man and the other the body of a woman, or so they thought. Upon closer inspection, researchers quickly realized that something about the skeletal remains of both bodies weren't quite right. The man's limbs seemed out of place and the woman's jaw was slightly too large for her skull. Fast forward 10 years to 2012 and researchers discovered that they didn't find the body of two people, but the body parts of at least half a dozen. The woman was made up of body parts from people who had all died around the same time, while the man was made up of parts belonging to people who had died up to hundreds of years apart. Not only that, but evidence suggested that when the parts were put together, they would have still had mummified flesh on their bones, which is unpleasant to say the least, but it's a super dark and incredibly interesting discovery.
So this is incredibly cool. Archaeologists in Crete may have recently come across the most famous labyrinth in all of history, the labyrinth that was said to hold the Minotaur from Greek mythology. The Minotaur was a fearsome creature with the body of a man and the head of a bull, which lived in a labyrinth on the island of Crete, as the story goes. So this 4,000-year-old labyrinth on the island of Crete may have been the actual inspiration for that ancient story, which is amazing. The labyrinth was found on Pompeii Hill, and it's the first structure of its kind discovered in the area. The Greek Ministry of Culture says the Minoan civilization built it between 2000 and 1700 BCE. That has 8 circular stone walls arranged into a maze formation, and some parts of the walls are still standing up to 5.5 feet high. The structure is divided into 4 sections by internal walls, creating a series of passageways, and inside there's a small circular building also divided into quadrants. Now, aside from the labyrinth's potential connection to that mythological tale of the Minotaur, they're still not 100% sure what it was actually built for, but they did find a bunch of animal bones that may have been used for rituals and offerings. Either that or animals just wandered into the maze and then were never able to make it out. That's always a possibility as well.
Next up, we have a mass grave discovered in Slovakia just 2 years ago in 2022, containing approximately 35 skeletons, the majority of which were missing their heads. The grave dates all the way back to 5000 BC, and researchers believe that the bodies excavated from the site likely belonged to the victims of sacrifice. Due to the grave site, which is essentially just a large ditch's proximity to a defense wall, archaeologists studying the find have theorized that the decapitated individuals were killed in the hopes that their sacrificial deaths would strengthen the wall and therefore provide safety to the communities living in the area. Many of the skeletons found belong to people who died around the middle or near end of their pre-adulthood lives, I'm talking 20 and under, which indicate that they might have been sacrificed for their strength, stamina, and agility.
In 2015, archaeologists made a pretty remarkable but unsettling discovery in Flanders, Belgium. They uncovered the bodies of 125 World War I soldiers in a perfectly preserved German trench system. So this area had been untouched since the war ended, hidden beneath what is now a housing development. Most of the soldiers were German, but there were also British, French, and South African men. The soldiers fell during some of the fiercest battles of the war. Some of their remains were found right where they had died. Others were buried in mass graves by their comrades, often with religious artifacts. And the site was about the size of 2 football fields on a ridge known as Hill 80. This ridge saw intense combat, especially during the First Battle of Ypres in November 1914, where a lot of German soldiers died. The area was later taken by British and Irish troops in June of 1917, but then the Germans retook it again in 1918, leading to even more casualties on both sides. There were more personal items as well, like watches, religious items like crucifixes and rosary beads, and there was even a bottle of HP sauce, which just goes to show that these were real people, you know, making food. And I think a lot of times when we look back on these wars, it's easy to disconnect from the fact that, you know, They had HP sauce they were cooking with. Makes it all seem more real.
Next up, we have a pretty macabre discovery made in 2019 during an excavation that took place in Selengo, Ecuador. Along with the remains of 11 people who would have been buried at the site and multiple ancient artifacts were 2 helmets made from human bones. Skulls, to be exact, and young ones too. Apparently 2 of the young bodies they found were wearing the skulls of other slightly older young people over their heads like some kind of disturbing medieval bike helmet. I shudder to think of what they might have used for straps. While it is unknown why the helmets were placed onto the heads of the young bodies, it is assumed that it was likely done so during the time of their burials as part of a ritual designed to protect them in the afterlife. However, other theories suggest that the young bodies were buried as part of a ritual meant to calm an active volcano nearby, i.e. they were sacrifices. It's pretty dark.
So when you look at this image here, you probably assume this poor guy died instantly being crushed by this boulder, right? Well, it turns out that may not be the case. Don't get me wrong, he still died horrifically though. In fact, he went out in a much worse way. This is the body of a man who's been dubbed the unluckiest man, and he died in Pompeii during the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Archaeologists recently removed the boulder to examine the remains and found that the dude's skull was surprisingly intact. The Pompeii Archaeological Park made a statement about the discovery, saying, quote, "The identified skeletal remains consist of the upper part of the thorax, the upper limbs, the skull, and jaw. His death was presumably not therefore due to the impact of the stone block, as initially assumed, but likely to asphyxia caused by the pyroclastic flow." So this dude was trapped under a boulder. Yeah, I'd say he really lives up to his name. Yippee for him.
Next up, we have the Sandby Borg killings discovered in 2010 during a study of a 5th century Swedish site in the island of Öland. While excavating the grounds, an archaeologist stumbled upon the ruins of an old home, and while exploring the home, they came across a human skeleton. At first, they wondered why it wouldn't have been given a proper burial, but then they came across another, and another, until the remains of 26 people were counted by the team, all showing signs of having died at the same time due to execution-style killings. It became apparent then that a mass killing event had taken place in the home sometime between 450 and 550 AD. Also found in the home were fossilized half-eaten fish, coins, and jewelry, supporting the theory of an ambush attack. But there was no evidence to suggest who carried out the killings or why.
Here's a pretty strange recent find: plastic rocks in nature. Scientists have been looking at Brazil's volcanic Trindade Island for years, but just in 2023 there was an unsettling discovery: rocks made from melted plastic debris. The island has always been a nesting ground for green turtles, but now it's also home to these strange plastic-infused rocks. The plastic rocks are being called plastiglomerates. Plastiglomerates? Well, they're formed from a mixture of natural sediments and plastic. So they form on plastic waste, mainly from fishing nets apparently, melts and combines with the natural material on the beach. Geologist Fernanda Avelar Santos said the place where we found these samples is a permanently preserved area in Brazil, near the place green turtles lay their eggs. This makes the discovery even more alarming as it highlights how pervasive plastic pollution has become. She continues, "The garbage in the sea and the plastic dumped incorrectly in the oceans is becoming geological material preserved in the Earth's geological records." Interesting to see what'll happen like 100 years from now when this continues to happen.
Next up, we have a discovery made in 2003 by a group of archaeologists exploring the Atacama desert of Chile. A mummified skeleton that at first glance looks a bit like it belongs to the body of someone or something that did not find its origins on this planet. I mean, it has 10 ribs instead of 12, giant eye sockets, and an incredibly elongated skull that ends in a point. For decades, UFO enthusiasts were convinced that the skeleton belonged to an alien, so much so that the mummy was actually featured in a 2013 UFO documentary. Unfortunately for the believers, in 2018 the alien theory was debunked when good old DNA testing decided to join the party. Turns out the genes were 100% human, and the body belonged to a young female living 500 years ago with severe genetic bone mutations. Or so they say.
And finally we have Aramu Muru. This place sounds really intriguing to me. So Aramu Muru is a rock formation near Lake Titicaca in Peru, which has some very strange stories attached to it. So this massive stone structure is often referred to as the Gate of the Gods. It stands about 23 feet tall and has a perfectly carved 7-meter high rectangular niche in its center. So the question has always been, though, what is the origin of this place? What was it made for? Local folklore tells tales of the pre-Inca civilization, suggesting that Aramu Muru is a gateway to another dimension. According to the legend, Aramu Muru was an ancient priest who used a golden disc known as the Key of the Gods of the Seven Rays to open the portal and pass through it with his followers, never to be seen again. But archaeologists and researchers, of course, have their own theories. Some think that the place is a ceremonial site, possibly linked to nearby Tiwanaku culture, known for its advanced understanding of stone carving and alignment with astronomy. Until this day, though, the true origin and the purpose of this place is still relatively unknown. But what makes it even weirder is that there are a number of stories of people going missing around here. There are also reports of a strange bluish glow coming from the area.
Number 10, we have an octopus nursery. 8-legged alien-looking things with suction cups all over their arms and beaks for mouths. Octopus are creepy-looking things, and to top it all off, they can camouflage like a Navy SEAL, and they are super smart. If these are the kind of things that make your skin crawl, then just running into one of these guys would probably freak you out. Well, on the underwater expedition at the Davidson Seamount, there was a rather shocking discovery. They had a remote probe that was on the ocean floor around 10,000 feet, and they came across which seemed to be an octopus that was next to not just one, not just two, but a group of 1,000 octopuses in a nursery. They were all there laying their eggs and using the heat from the volcanic vent to keep them warm. I would hate to be the guy who accidentally steps into that crack and then gets devoured by thousands of sticky arms. But if you're at 10,000 feet underwater, you probably are already screwed. At number 9, we have the Siberian lake monster. Of course, if we're doing a list of scary things that live underwater, we have to throw a giant mysterious sea monster on here. What separates the Siberian lake monster from other more popular guys that we have seen like Loch Ness and that kind of stuff is that underwater scans have actually picked this guy up. This thing is deep in Lake Labyrinth, and some radar has shown that it looks like a 33-foot long creature is living there. Now this is probably just a skeleton, but if this thing is dead, it means that there was once a giant man-eating monster in this lake. I thought we were supposed to be safe in freshwater. They've nicknamed this thing the Devil, so you know he's a good time and loves company. So next time you go up to the cottage and you're swimming in the water and you feel safe, remember there might be a giant monster lurking underneath the water ready to turn you into a side dish. At number 8, we have the blue hole. Now there are several blue holes in the world. There's one in Belize, there's one in the Red Sea, there's a giant one in my heart that was left there from when Reboot ended on a cliffhanger. How are you going to end a show that so many people fell in love with on a cliffhanger? I will never trust again. Well, this one is between Cape Verde and the Caribbean islands. Scientists are really confused about this thing. It's a crack in the bottom of the ocean floor and it's several thousand miles long. What's strange about this is there's no explanation of how this happened. It might have been tectonic plates moving around, but when this happened, the Earth will probably start to repair itself and there's been no sign of this. My theory is this is where Godzilla goes to sleep at night. I mean, it seems like the most logical answer. It's either that or the gateway to hell. Like, come on guys, I'm doing real science work here. At number 7, we have the Yonaguni complex. This was discovered by scuba divers in the 1980s. I think that's the scariest part about this one. Could you imagine going scuba diving back in the 80s? The technology back then must have been a tube going up to some guy who would blast fresh air down to you using a bicycle pump. I don't even think they had decompression sickness figured out back then. The chances of you coming up the bends was probably super high. Well, if it wasn't for a few divers in Japan who were willing to sacrifice it all to look at some cool stuff, we wouldn't know anything about the Yonaguni complex. It's still a mystery as to what this thing is. It looks like some temples that might have existed thousands of years ago, but when the ice age decided to melt, it would have covered this entire area. This could be why an entire civilization got plunged underwater. Or the temple could have been on a cliff, and then when a massive earthquake hit, it knocked the temple into the water. But like everything in life, there are some haters who say this whole thing is just a natural rock formation. Some people just want to ruin everything. At number 6 we have Anaconda Cista Twista. One of the reasons why the underwater world is such a mystery is because we find things like this in there. Sure, there are beautiful things down there like bright fish and chubby marine mammals, but there's also the unknown, unidentified organisms like Anaconda Cista Twista, which should be the name of an 80s hair metal band. But what is this thing? Well, it's a protist. And what is a protist, you may ask? Well, it's an organism that doesn't belong to any animal group, fungus, or plant group. What does that mean? I really have no idea, you guys. I think it means it could be an alien. Some alien came down to Earth for a swim and then scraped its knee on some coral, and now we have alien creatures running around the ocean, probably waiting for you to pee so it can swim up your pee hole and then work its way into your brain. It's really the only logical answer. At number 5 we have the Bimini Road. How were the pyramids made? Was it aliens coming down to share their technology and secrets with us, or was it just thousands upon thousands of slaves who sacrificed their lives and their spines to build them? Well, we don't know and we may never know, but the Bimini Road is another one of these mysteries. It's off the coast of the Bahamas, and it looks like it could have been a pathway that was placed perfectly with giant slabs of rock. Similar to the way the pyramids were made, it seems that these large slabs of rock were too large to be moved by man, and also like the pyramids, these giant slabs were also perfectly placed so well. So where does everyone's mind go when something like this happens? Well, magic or aliens. The logical answer is that this is a natural phenomenon of the water moving and hitting the rocks to make these formations, but people think that this was made using advanced technology from aliens and could have been the road to Atlantis. Honestly, I like the Atlantis theory much better. It's more fun. At number 4 we have Colossal Squid. Yeah, this thing is a big no thanks for me. So everyone always talks about how there might be sea monsters out there, but this thing actually exists. There's never been one caught alive, but several have washed onto shores dead, and they are massive. The largest one ever discovered was 45 feet long, and it was dead. So you know there was an even bigger one out there that killed this guy. They don't even have suckers on their tentacles, they have hooks. Let me say that again. This squid has 10 giant arms covered in hooks. This thing is straight out of a horror movie. Scientists aren't even sure what something this big eats. They think it probably feeds on whales or your deepest darkest fears. I wouldn't be surprised if the colossal squid works part-time as a gatekeeper for hell. It makes me think that the old Greek stories about the Kraken might have been real. At number 3 we have underwater circles. Giant formations of circles that are formed underwater and nobody knows how they got there. These mysteries were discovered off the coast of North Carolina, Florida, and Belize. Now what are they? Like many things on this list, myself and the entire scientific community have no idea. But here are some theories. Maybe they were formed naturally by either two things, water currents or some sort of animal mating ritual. Another idea is that these things were made by ancient civilizations before the Ice Age. All these things would have been above ground and might have been art left over by some old-timey tribes. And the third theory is that they look kind of like a bullseye, so it might be some sort of nuclear missile target, and if you hit it hard enough, the explosion will cause some sort of major natural disaster like an earthquake or tsunami, or if we're lucky, both. At number 2 we have Megalodon. If you have a fear of sharks, you're gonna love this one. Megalodon was a prehistoric shark that was even bigger than the giant hooked tentacle beast that was earlier on this list. If you've already forgotten about the colossal squid, it clocked in at around 45 feet long, where Megalodon was closer to 60 feet long. It was a 60-foot shark that could probably rip a blue whale in half in one bite. Well, maybe not that, but it was still a gargantuan creature with teeth the size of Brock Lesnar's fists. This thing wouldn't even chew you, it would just swallow you whole and then fart your skeleton out into the dark cold ocean. At number 1 on our list we have Giant Eyeball. A mysterious giant eyeball washed onto the shore of a Florida beach back in October of 2012. I don't know any other kind of giant eyeball other than a mysterious one. There's no super common regular giant eyeball just lying around. But this is also Florida. This is the state where people smoke crack at weddings and kiss alligators on the lips, so maybe it's a little more common over there. Well, this giant eyeball was found by Gino Cavacci, and he didn't know what the hell to make of it, so he took it home and then stuck it in his freezer. Then he called the cops, and the cops came in and told him, "We don't do giant eyeballs on the beach. You have to call the wildlife people." And then he called the wildlife people, and they were like, "What the hell is that?" And he was like, "I don't know. I brought it to you guys to try and figure out what it is." And then some people were like, "Maybe it's a sea monster," and other people were like, "No, it's probably from a marlin." And I think in the end, no one really knew what the hell it was. But just so you know, there's giant eyeballs out there just laying around the beach sometime.
We're kicking off the list with the bear. flare. I wanted to start off with this one because it's actually a story a buddy of mine told me from when he used to work as a camp counselor. So yeah, he would take kids out on these like long treks through the woods on these canoe trips. And he'd be about like 2 weeks long, some of them. And one day they were out, they'd found a camping spot and they put up their tents and everything for the night. They'd had a fire, everyone went to bed, the counselors were in their tents, and then they heard a sound which sounded like a large animal stalking around in the woods, kind of around their campsite. They kind of whispered to each other like, what should we do? We have all these campers here with us, they obviously have to protect them. They got out of their tents and they decided to shoot off a flare. They had some flares specifically for bear encounters. And at this point, they pretty much know it's a bear. Like they hear it growling and it's like, yeah, it's pretty clear what this is. They fire the flare off in the direction where they're hearing this growling. And it's nighttime now, so they can't really see anything. But as the flare starts shooting through the woods, it just illuminates this big like black bear, like just kind of illuminated through the flare, at which point it luckily turns around and runs into the forest. But yeah, suffice to say, they're pretty shook after that. Like, what would they have done if the bear didn't decide to run away? Yeah, freaky stuff. All right, next up we have a tale I'm going to call The Vanishing Man. This story was posted to Reddit by user Throwaway Friend, and I gotta say, if this happened to me, I'd be shaken up for a long time. I definitely felt a chill up my spine reading this one, so here it goes. Back in 2015, I was on a hiking trail in Arizona. I have hiked a lot in worse terrains in Europe, so I wasn't too worried about doing it alone. It was almost getting dark, and I was at an eerily deserted stretch for what felt like hours now. Suddenly, I heard a kind of music. As I kept going, I realized it was someone whistling. It gave me the creeps, but the idea of company relieved me a bit, too. Soon enough, I saw a man in front of me walking the same direction. He was wearing a t-shirt and pants, which was surprisingly inadequate, especially for the impending night. I passed him by. He was the one whistling, indeed. Turned to say the customary greetings. He looked up, deadpan, and without a word, turned back down towards the ground and kept whistling. He was walking slowly in an almost trance-like manner. I quickly averted my gaze forward, and almost abruptly, the whistling stopped. I turned back to see what had happened, and there was absolutely no one on the trail. Zilch. Didn't even feel like anyone had been there. At our number 8 spot, we have The Skeleton. The story was posted to Reddit by WhaleHeart0129. When they were 11, they went camping with their mom, her boyfriend, and their little brother outside of Las Vegas, in the middle of the desert. One morning, the group decided to go arrowhead hunting. During their hike, they stumbled on a full human skeleton laid out on a blanket, tucked under a bush. The person appeared as if they had fallen asleep and never woken up. The boyfriend knelt down, offering a prayer over the remains, and then they all walked back to the campsite in complete silence, each person just shocked by what they'd seen. They promptly contacted the ranger, and the boyfriend later got into a helicopter to guide them to the location of the remains. Turned out to be a young man who had been missing for almost a year. Next up on the list, we have a story shared by Reddit user Particular Night 392, who wrote about an odd creature they came face to face with while hiking. So in early 2019, they went hiking with a friend. After walking for at least 30 minutes, they heard a rustling in a bush a few feet in front of them, and then a deer emerged, but something about it seemed kinda off. The creature lacked a tail, its ears were unusually small, almost invisible. Its eyes were abnormally large, giving it an almost goat-like appearance. The deer, or whatever this thing was, just stood still, fixated on the hikers. As it began to approach, they noticed something was off about its eyes, too. They weren't the usual brown, but a dark, piercing red. Their friend, who was visibly shaken, remained still beside them. When the deer ventured too close for comfort, the friend grabbed their arm and they both ran, not daring to look behind them. Number 6, Lights. The Trek is this website dedicated to all things hiking. When readers were asked to share some of their creepiest stories while hiking, Sarah Legg posted this one. It was a long, rainy and cold night. Having just settled into her tent for the night with her canine companion, she was aware of being only a mile from a lengthy dirt road. Any sounds or lights were quickly dismissed as coming from said road. Lying in the tent, she began to hear unsettling noises resembling raindrops on a raincoat, as if someone were moving around the tent. Less than 5 minutes later, a flash of light caught Sarah's attention. She thought maybe another camper had arrived, but she hadn't seen anyone. The lights formed a horizontal pattern around the tent, blinking from left to right as if someone was circling the tent. She tried to tell herself it was just car lights, but then things took an unexpected turn. The lights appeared above the tent, maintaining a perfect formation. Sarah, realizing that the lights couldn't be explained by nearby cars or reflections, started to get really unsettled. She covered her face with her sleeping bag, praying that whatever it was wouldn't pose any harm. She never found out what those lights were. Next up, we have another story shared by a different commenter, Jerry De Jong, on the same Trek site. So some years back, Jerry had been out hiking near Mount Shasta with a buddy. They had set up a camp for the night, cowboy camping by a crackling fire, enjoying cold beers and cooking up a pair of steaks. Then, out of the blue, Jerry's friend took a log and started whacking it against a tree. According to him, it was how Bigfoot communicates. Jerry encouraged him to give it another shot. He knocked at the tree again, and sure enough, a few minutes later, 4 distinct knocks echoed in the distance, loud enough to be something hefty smacking against a tree. Minutes crawled by, and it happened again. Both of them could sense something sizable moving in the forest. 4 knocks, followed by 2, roughly 100 yards away. Next thing they knew, they were packing up camp in record time as the sounds of something large moved in the forest only 20 to 30 yards away. Jerry had heard large animals in the woods before, grizzly bears, elk, moose, but whatever this thing was, it sounded nothing like any of those. And at number 4, we have the banana spider. This is a tale shared with us on Reddit by user Kamala2024. More of an icky discovery than a dark one, but if you have a fear of creepy crawlies, this story is going to make you cringe. So here's the story. Hiking early morning in Hawaii, and my stomach notifies me that it's time to go number 2. I find a porta potty near the trailhead and jump in to do my business. Once complete, I flip my headlamp on to find the toilet paper, but instead find a huge 5 inches in diameter banana spider hanging out in the corner of the porta potty. Trying not to spook it, I slowly reached for the 1-ply. As I do, my headlamp shines on this monster and it proceeds to freak the F out. It runs in circles for a bit, both of us losing our minds at this point, and ends up between my legs inside of my underwear. I'm at a complete loss of what to do, but eventually begin wiggling back and forth in an attempt to get this spider to remove itself. That didn't work at all. Instead of exiting the premises, this mother effer runs up my leg. This is the point where I just give up and storm out of the porta potty, yelling and screaming. Pants around my ankles. No clue what happened to the spider, but it disappeared in a flash, just like my dignity. Our next story is called The Lost Hiker. It was shared by a man named Jeff Fissel. One weekend, Jeff headed down to Wilson's Creek Wilderness for a camping trip with a buddy. As the night settled in, Jeff woke up to find his tent mate crouched over him brandishing a knife. Jeff was obviously pretty petrified, thinking his friend was about to knife him, but trying to keep his cool, he asked, hey man, what's going on? His friend whispered, listen, and after what felt like an eternity, a spine-chilling call echoed through the wilderness. Jeff sprang up and grabbed his own knife. The eerie voice drew closer. The unsettling voice lingered nearby, then slowly moved away, still emanating eerie sounds. The next morning, Jeff and his buddy struggled to make sense of the strange encounter. Packed up, and on the trail, they stumbled on an orange ribbon with a message. It was for a lost day hiker who hadn't returned the previous day, suspected to be hungry, cold, and wandering the area all night. That must have been the man making the noises the night before. They realized they likely ignored a lost hiker. The problem was he never really asked for help, only making ghostly moans. Number 2, That's Not Kevin. This one was shared by Cookies Choco, whose friends came face to face with something in the woods that they thought was their friend. The story goes as follows. I was in the woods with 3 friends at night. A friend's house was nearby, and I was getting hungry, so I went inside to find some food. Another friend came inside with me. 2 friends were still outside. Later on, one of the 2 who were outside comes in and sees the indoor friend on the couch next to me. They panic and immediately run back outside. I poke my head out the door asking what's going on, only to hear them yell as loudly as they can, "That's not Kevin!" Everyone comes inside and calms down a bit, and the story comes out. They thought the friend who was indoors with me, Kevin, had been outside with them this entire time. Why? Because in the darkness of the woods they saw a silhouette about the same height walking alongside them silently. And then at some point it ran away and they were chasing it thinking Kevin was running off for some reason. The reason my friend yelled, "That's not Kevin," was to stop the last outdoor friend from chasing whoever was out deeper into the woods. We still have no idea what that was or why they didn't ever speak. Finally, we have what I'm going to call the tale of the happy truck. This is a first-hand account shared to Reddit by Dying Lion. If this story is true, it's up there with some of the eeriest stories I've seen on Reddit. They describe the creepiest experience they had while hiking, not being with any wild animal, but with a little black pickup truck with rainbow and unicorn stickers. They were out walking their dog when they encountered the vehicle. It was blasting bubblegum pop music and smelled like cotton candy when it rolled by. First time it passed, it took a weird swerve toward them like it was aiming to hit. They quickly jumped out of the way, no big deal. Figured the driver may have got spooked seeing someone out at night with the reflective gear, but then the truck circled back and started driving right for them. This time, they were ready, snatched up their dog and jumped into a ditch. The car just missed them. Over the noise of the engine, there was this eerie, high-pitched maniacal laughter, sounding like it was coming from a little girl. The tiny truck pulled the same stunt for a 3rd time, but by then they ducked into a neighbor's shrubbery. From the hiding spot, they watched the little truck slowly cruise down the road, the creepy giggles echoing as it passed. Luckily, it kept on going, never to be seen again.
In at number 10 we have refrigeration. Before mechanical refrigerations, people would keep their food cold in ice and snow, but this was only temporarily and not ideal. In 1805, an American inventor, Oliver Evans, designed the first refrigeration machine. Well, thankfully for that invention of the refrigerator, we can now keep our leftover pizzas fresher for longer. Coming full steam ahead, at number 9 is the steam engine. Without this invention, the modern world would be a completely different place. This is probably one of the most important developments during the Industrial Revolution because the steam engine facilitated major advancements in the fields of mining, manufacture, agriculture, and transportation. Diving our way into number 8 spot is the wheel. Surprisingly, the wheel was invented relatively late in human history during the Bronze Age in 3500 BC, when humans was already developing human civilization. Wheels, however, were not initially invented for transportation only. They were used by potters for pottery making. However, the invention of the modern wheel has completely revolutionized the way early human beings traveled and transported goods. Connecting us to number 7 is the internet. For many people, life without the internet is hard to imagine. And unlike other technologies, the creation of the internet cannot be attributed to just one person. The internet was worked by dozens of scientists, programmers, and engineers who each developed features that merged to become the World Wide Web in which we know today. We use the internet for resourcing, information, communication, and for economic gains. Lighting things up at number 6 is electricity. We can thank Michael Faraday for his 2 big discoveries that changed our lives forever. In 1821, he discovered when a wire carrying an electricity current is placed next to a single magnetic pole, the wire will rotate. This led to the development of the electric motor. A decade later, he was the first person to produce an electric current by moving a wire through a magnetic field. His experiment created the first generator which was responsible for producing electricity. electricity. Sanitation systems makes this list at number 5. Before the development of sanitation systems, people were targets for disease, dehydration, and in extreme cases, even death. Before this advancement, humans can only settle where freshwater sources were, but now sanitation systems allow us to relocate across long distances. The main benefits of sanitation systems is to provide a clean environment that breaks the cycle of disease. Moving away to number 4, anesthesia. Imagine a world where you required surgery and had to stay awake for the entire thing. Okay. I don't actually want to imagine that because I would be freaking out. Well, thankfully, we don't have to. Back in 1846, the fear of painful surgery was a thing of the past when Dr. Thomas Green Morton used ether for the first time to accomplish a surgery. With the development of progressiveness of anesthesia, difficult surgeries or surgeries that require extra time can be performed pain-free. Things get hot, and at number 3 with fire. The ability to control and create fire was a major turning point in human evolution that allowed us to cook food and have warmth and a sense of protection during the night. Evidence for controlled use of the fire by the Homo erectus was about 400,000 years ago. Fire also allowed us to improve cooking practices, which in turn improved health, killed parasites in meats, and reduced the amount of energy required for chewing and digestion. And now at number 2 is the invention of penicillin. Before the discovery by Alexander Fleming in 1928, there was no effective treatment for infections such as pneumonia, and hospitals were full of people with blood poisoning that was contracted from a cut or a scratch. But now with the discovery of penicillin, it is often described as a miracle drug, and it is estimated that it has saved over 200 million lives. Claiming the number 1 spot for the top 10 biggest scientific breakthroughs is the development of vaccinations. Although this is a controversial topic for some, vaccinations have immensely impacted our world today. They reduce the spread of infectious disease that cause death. Today, vaccines have an excellent safety record, and most vaccine scares have been shown to be false alarms. The misconception about vaccines being dangerous has caused some countries to not take part in vaccinations, which has caused the reemergence of some diseases that could have been prevented, such as measles. Well, there you guys have it. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you guys learned a thing or two, or even 10 things. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you guys very, very soon.
Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. It's about mysterious small towns from around the world that are hiding some terrible dark secrets that will mess you up. Click the video now to find out more. You won't regret this decision.